which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. Is there anyone else present that plans to record? Okay, welcome. Before we get going, I just want to remind everyone that this will be the first meeting that we will be following a slightly different agenda format when it comes to public input. Based on a recently adopted policy from our review with MASC, public input at the beginning of the meeting will be on agenda items. So if anybody needs a copy of the agenda, they're up by the front door. And then if you have other items you would like to bring up, there'll be a second opportunity for public comment towards the end of the meeting. So just so everybody's aware of that. Okay, so before we get to that, first item on the agenda is consent agenda for our meeting on August 7th. Everybody have a chance to look that over?
I move that we approve the minutes of the regular school committee meeting of August 7th.
Second.
You weren't here for that meeting, so I don't know
Oh,
if you can second it.
The 7th?
7th.
yeah, no, you weren't here.
No, wrong one, sorry.
Second.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions, any corrections on the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, 3 and 1 abstention.
I wanted to be here.
1.
Why? You were in a good place.
Okay, so next up, good news? Any good news?
Oh, sorry, I was reading something. I got a little distracted. So good news, obviously, we're back in school. Everybody's very excited to be back. We've had a chance to go through many of the buildings, Dr. Lang and myself, to see what's happening, how everything is moving along, and it's moving along. The other piece is, and I know that Al spoke about it, our National Honor Society students came last week. They put together over, let's see, I'm almost at 100 backpacks that still need to be delivered for students that might need those or some type of assistance, and they're beautiful. They're full of lots of different things, and we want to thank the Rotary and our students for helping us get to that point.
I want to thank you for giving up your
My space.
your area and helping. And just for your information, we honored Gwen Paquette
Yep.
at Rotary today because she was able to, get all of that stuff. It averaged about $16 a piece for the backpacks, and you can't even get the backpack, no matter all the stuff that she put in, so she did a great job.
Yeah, she always does. She does such a nice job with that. So, and they're beautiful backpacks, too. So
Good.
now the schools are looking forward to getting some, and we'll be delivering them. Anybody that's available, like to help deliver, feel free to, come along, and I'll give you some backpacks.
I might as well do this now. There's a program that the Alumni Association will be starting with in about a week. When we did our Giving Day last year, we wanted to do something so the current kids would benefit from it. So we're starting a mini grant program. The superintendent met with us and gave some input on that. So the idea is that clubs, teams, whatever, at the school can apply for mini grants for things that would make life in their activity better and not covered by the school. I get an example which is simple but understandable. Is the chess club might need new chess sets or something like that. If a program came through that would be, we didn't put categories on this, so if a program came through that would benefit all the kids and they wanted to do it, like a speaker that somebody found was really good, could do it that way. So the information will go out. We're finishing the forms right now, about the next week. And then in October, there's an alumni night like we had last year, and the recipients will be announced that night. But it's not big money, but I think it's just, something that should be fun for the kids to get that little bit of extra money.
Great. Okay, anybody else? Any good news? Okay, moving on then. We're now at the public input part of our meeting. If you'd like to speak to the committee about any of the items on tonight's agenda, please come forward and state your name and address for the recording secretary. Although we cannot engage in discussion or debate about the issues at this time, we'll do our best to answer your questions or concerns when we get to that item on the agenda.
Good evening. So my name is Maria Santos, and I'm from 19 Parkhurst Road here in Chelmsford.
The item that I'd like to address is the, number 3, the preliminary kindergarten enrollment. It just really struck me that one school, which is Center School, really has a total differential between the other school at 83 enrollment of 20 students, which is one classroom. So I don't know how you can avoid this going forward to make sure that there's a teacher lined up and a classroom available. But I thought our policy in the district was 25 students per class or lower, and not 23 average district-wide. So I'm wondering if tonight you could discuss a bit about what the policy is, and secondly, how you would address this going forward, and then finally, what you are thinking of doing for next year and the class sizes for the first grade, having an extra class already available at the Center School or any other school that's very close to that number. And just a thought, and I'm sure all of you think of it this way as well, but class size matters so much going forward, and especially at a K level where you're trying to figure out where these children are in the system, where they're going forward. It impacts every single child in that classroom and the teacher who's trying to provide the services that they need to provide. And the district trying to provide the services they need to provide. So I just wanted to make sure that those issues were discussed if possible tonight, and how we would address this going forward. Thank you, and then I'll come to the next meeting and comment at the end of the meeting, and I'll go home and watch it on TV. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much.
Am I supposed to now sign name here? Is that what it is? Okay,
Yeah,
we'll
just
do
for the
it.
record. Oh, okay.
You've got me? Okay, thank you very much. And I like your new agenda.
Okay, would anybody else like to speak at this time?
I don't know if I can put mine if you want. I don't know if I can put mine in this, it's just an invitation to you all. So do I need to?
Yeah,
answer
yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, come on.
Announcements.
Yeah, announcements.
Yeah, that's fine.
We should-
Hi,
Oh,
I'm Kristen Erickson, 291 Acton Road, and I'm the co-chair of the Chelmsford CPAC. I sent an email to all of you. I hope I didn't exclude anybody, but we just wanted to give you a personal invitation. We are very excited to start this year and really feel like we're just heading in a really good direction, really, with a lot of good people that we have, with a lot of good goals. And the first meeting for CPAC is going to be a special workshop put on by Leslie, who is, I don't know what you call her title, but she's from the Federation of Children with Special Needs. She deals with the CPACs, and she's going to do this team-building workshop for our district to include the school committee, administrators, principals, CPAC members, board members, and other parents, if they're interested. And so we just wanted to be sure that you knew about that. It's Thursday, September 27th, from 7 to 9 at the Chelmsford High Learning Commons, which is the library upstairs. And we hope to just continue to work on having a great relationship and build that relationship and a good working environment for our kids.
Was that 7 or 7:30?
7,
7 o'clock on the
On-
27th.
Thursday, September 27th.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and the principals, we invited the principals too.
All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you
That's
for
all.
putting that on. That sounds
Yes.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Learning comments? It's in the learning comments?
Learning Commons, yeah, the library. Yep. All right, moving on to new business. First item on new business is to try to start setting up some goals for this coming school year. So I asked the superintendent to put a couple things in the packet. One was the results of our review of our goals from last year. On the 7th, I believe we did that, so I know John wasn't here and Bob wasn't here, so I wanted to just include that so you can take a look at it. And if you look at the last page of that, with all the numbers on it, what you'll see is that in terms of the district-wide goals, we did start to cover some of the points that we set out to start to cover, particularly with the program with Middlesex and also the assistant principals. On the second goal, one of the things that we looked at is the therapeutic classroom, which is now in full swing this fall. And the third goal, we met as a subcommittee, facility subcommittee, to kind of work our way to coming up with a 10-year capital plan. So I think we did accomplish some of the things we set out to, not all of the things we set out to do. So, my suggestion is going to be that we kind of keep those district-wide goals, the overall overarching goals, and just kind of work on some other action items on that list. So I'll go over that when we get to that part of it. As far as the school committee professional practice goals, I think in general, we felt that we did a pretty good job accomplishing what we set out to do. And goal number one, as far as the meeting format and agenda, how we're going to do public input, as we did tonight, and also perhaps putting on the public forums, and we're going to talk about that again tonight in a little bit more detail. Our communication amongst ourselves, we had MASC in for that workshop, and for those of us that attended it, I think it was a good, productive meeting. We got a lot out of that. And then as far as policy review, we're almost done. We've gone through them all at this point, and we're towards the end of approving them. So I think that we really did a pretty good job with that part of it. So what I propose, and this is on the next page, is, again, to keep the district-wide goals. And what I did is I kind of tweaked them a little bit in that the way they were written last year, some of them were very specific, some of them were more general and more kind of geared just to the overall objective and the strategic plan. So I kind of rewrote the ones that needed to be written to be more general, to be more like what the objectives were in the strategic plan, and then the action step below. So in the original one last year, collaborative agreements with colleges was actually what the goal was, and then they had the other steps, but kind of taking that out, making the goal a little bit more general, putting that as one of our action items, and you can see that it is something we worked on last year. I think it's still ongoing, because I don't think we're done. I think, there's other opportunities to establish other collaborations. And same thing with number 4, that was the assistant principals. We accomplished that, but again, we'll look and see how that worked this year, see if we want to keep with that model, if we want to go to a different model. And then I actually added a new one, in terms of one-on-one collaborative, one-on-one computer initiative, because that's, again, another way for kids to learn, another pathway the kids can learn. So the goal itself is linked to the strategic plan, and the first objective of the strategic plan, and those are the action items. Same thing with number 2. The overall goal is linked to the strategic plan. We accomplished number 2 in terms of the therapeutic classroom. I rewrote the one with the social workers, because we're going to be kind of looking at that a little bit differently, I think. And then I added on there as maybe another possible thing to look at is programs for students with language-based learning disabilities. And then in the last one, in terms of the district-wide goals, again, rewrote it to be a little bit more general as far as the goal. Moved the 10-year capital plan as action items. Added athletics into looking at different accounts, student activity accounts. And then for number 5, just investigate alternative building plans based on feedback from NSBA. We resubmitted again this year. We'll probably get some feedback. If we resubmit again next year and we're not getting the feedback we want, where are we going to go from there, that type of thing. So again, the overall goals are pretty much the same as this year. I just added a few new items and just kind of highlighted what we accomplished. And then with the professional practice goals, based on our self-evaluation, everybody that did the self-evaluation seemed to feel we're doing a pretty good job in most areas. The 3 areas that people had some concerns with and thought we could do better on were on having a public relations plan, providing new committee members with training and orientation when they first get on the committee, and then taking advantage of education workshop, conferences, that type of thing. So those are the 3 items that in general we felt we needed to work on. I think those are what we should work on this year. So I just wrote some goals to kind of address those. Communication strategy, a new member orientation and mentoring, and then increased professional development. So I don't know if people had a chance to look these over. If you want to take the next 2 weeks, look them over and come back with some feedback, however you want to go from here, or if you want to come up with something totally different. So, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to take some time to look them over. I like that you included a metric for measuring how it is that we're going to do on these goals, and I think that we should decide whether or not we're going to use that.
Yeah.
And I think that with regards to some of the goals, I like all of them a lot. I just think we have to decide, what does increase mean? Like, how do you measure that? Like, what do we, you know what I'm saying? If we're gonna increase public awareness in the Pride Initiative,
Metrics.
yeah, how do we determine whether or not we did that, you know? And just to come up with some ideas among ourselves as to how it is, you know, that we would determine that and the steps that we're gonna go about in order to make sure that this happens.
I agree.
I think the professional practice piece is really important.
Yep.
I think that's something that, I think you kind of know what you have to do when you come in professionally, but there are a lot of pieces that you don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. No offense, Donna.
I didn't know.
You mean in terms of new members coming in, things?
Yeah. So when new members coming in, I think that would be a great, so mentoring program makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I think you all get mentoring, right? But it's a little informal, so formalizing it kind of,
right.
yeah.
Because, you know, we have an election next spring, you know,
Yeah.
we get new members, you want to make sure that they're right up to speed with things right
Oh,
away.
don't go predicting things here.
Huh?
Just nothing.
All right, any other thoughts on it? Okay, so if you want to, I guess, at this point, if you want to take the next 2 weeks
I wanna take time.
and read them over, tear them apart, put them back together again, if you could think of measurables for some of those.
Or,
ones.
yeah, or just even a definition. It doesn't even
Yeah.
necessarily have to be
Yeah.
broken down, but just, you know,
Yeah,
what do we
and-
mean by that?
Right, and then if you want to just send me that feedback, and then we'll try to get it on for the next agenda item and, next agenda, and,
Just talk about tools, too.
Yeah.
What tools are you using to measure it? Like, are you doing surveys? Like, what's the
what's that called again, Linda? What is it?
Which one?
What is, you have the measurables?
smart?
Smart?
Smart
Smart
goals.
goals.
Smart goals.
Yeah.
We want SMART goals with action plans.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry.
Just
Oh,
wanna
thank you
say-
for doing this.
Yeah. No, you
Yeah.
did a good job. I was trying to compare my list of topics, so I'll just mention a couple of things that I would like to see us remember about, whether they fit in here or not, okay? I had down capital budget. I think it's really important for us to look at it. We sometimes just look at the list when it's getting sent off, but some of the stuff ends up on there for a long time, you know, yeah. So anyway, I had the communication, publicity, and all of that. I wrote it down as review status of number of things which were addressed, but if you don't mind, I'll just go through. Looking at the social emotional programs, these are all initiatives that we took this year, and I think that they will fit under our goal somewhere, but looking at that, the new elementary feeding program, dual enrollment, which is in there, public input, all of those things were initiatives this year, and I just want to make sure that they fit into,
Yep.
somehow check on them. One of the things that might go back with internships and that sort of thing, I don't know where we are on exchange programs. I know that we want to have programs that pay, but having taught American studies and various other social studies, having those kids in the building is great. And you see, a good example that we saw was when the adults came in and we saw, you know, the diversity and different way of looking at things that they brought in. And so, and in the wording about athletic money and so forth, maybe we can work on something on the status of the fields, because my name's on that list and I'm concerned.
Oh, the turf fields?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just, you know, where are we in the life? Because when we put in the fields, and everybody else did, they made an estimate of 10 years. That was just picking a number as far as I'm concerned. Nobody really had any background to know how long they'd last. So I think it would be interesting to, you know, stay on top of that. And also, and we have had reports on, we're paying the bills, but I think it would be good to just make sure we stay on top of
I
that.
have a comment.
I think that's all. I just wanted to see if my list tied
No,
into
you
yours.
know, and I think, you know, even the ones we worked on, like I said, you know, the dual enrollment, we're still gonna be looking at that. It's still gonna be an action item there. At least we know we hit it a little bit last year, but if something else comes up, you know, definitely, you know, same thing with the therapeutic classroom and, you know. 'cause
You
those-
want to get updates over the course of this year
Right.
to
Yeah.
just see how they're actually being implemented.
Yeah, well, it also points out how much we did.
Right.
Right.
Let's see, the administration did. No, seriously, we took on a lot of new things last year, and I didn't even have in there, you know, full-day kindergarten, but I mean, I think because we kicked off so many things, it's important that we kind of stay on top.
I agree.
So just real quick, I don't know if this maybe is a goal thing, or maybe this is a future agenda item, but maybe we should, I do want to have a discussion about evaluating fees to parents, possible reduction of fees in certain areas, see what's out there. I think we've talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
I think we need some like hard numbers around it. I don't know if that's a district goal, if it applies to this point, but it is something we keep talking about and then not moving forward on.
Yeah, it is definitely something in the pipeline. We're just waiting for a couple reports. And
Okay.
hopefully next meeting will be
Likely.
likely to get onto that, so.
One other thing that Barbara had brought up, it was in the news today, is the whole thing about starting later. It was a big news item today.
Yep.
Right.
And so, it's where we fit it in, we gotta look at it.
We should discuss it.
Yeah.
I could give you my opinion right now, but I'll wait.
Not on the agenda.
No.
Okay. All right, anybody else on that? Okay, so, again, if you could take a look at those and give me some feedback, and we'll try to finalize those the next meeting.
Okay. The one thing we are missing too, I know it has nothing to do with the goals, but when we upload them to the website, we don't have a group picture of the school committee on the school committee section of the website.
Oh,
So if we're all together at the next meeting, maybe if you just come 10 minutes early, I'll bring a camera and we can take a picture to be able to get up there. All the individuals are up, but there's like a little box where it's
I don't
supposed
like
to.
mine.
Your individual one?
Nope.
We can do a
No,
retake.
they cropped
someday.
it weird, and then they squished my head. Go look at the picture.
You sure that's what it is?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right,
We gotta keep this light.
that's right.
Keep it light.
Okay, moving on, next item is public forum dates, times, and topics. So before, in addition to changing public input in the meetings, we also talked about trying to set up some public forums over the course of the year on different topics. So we kind of threw out possibility of doing something in October on school safety. I don't know if you get more information about dates that.
No, we had talked about maybe kicking if we were to do this maybe like quarterly or something. The first one might be timely because we're gonna be doing that change in the options-based response protocol in the schools. The staff's gonna be training the end of September. Kids are gonna start training late September, early October. So if we picked a day or two in October, and we talked about possibly hosting it at the police department, that community room, which has the nice kind of stadium seating, it's a nice venue for it, in October. What we would need to do is actually just select a couple of dates that work for us, and then just see if they gel on the schedule for the police department, but they're pretty accommodating. So I didn't know if people had their calendars, if we looked to maybe just try to come up with a day or two in October that work for us, and then we'll run those by the police department in the morning, see if they work, and we could then plan a little publicity strategy for that event, working with the police department. We'll probably reuse some of the materials we're gonna use for the staff training, so that family members and community and parents can see the same training we're gonna be doing with the staffs later in September. So, you know, I personally think if we probably didn't try to rush it in before Columbus Day, I think that's gonna be tough. So if we looked, Columbus Day is the 8th, so if we looked, you know, probably the 10th on, that would give us time to be able to plan. You know, I don't know if we want to try to keep the Tuesday nights, because Tuesday nights seem to be good with the committee members, but totally up to you. But if we created, or picked like a night or two that worked for you guys, then I can run this by people tomorrow, and if it works, communicate that to you, but then start to actually pull material together.
Right, and I think, though, we also want to make sure that there's no PTO meetings or things like that, because there may be parents who want to come to that, and we
Right.
don't want to double book them.
Okay.
So we have a meeting on the 16th, so the Tuesdays would be the 9th, the 23rd, or we don't want to do
It
the
doesn't
30th.
have to be Tuesday,
Right.
but I would just.
But, yeah. So,
Sounds great.
anybody have any preferences?
What were the nights you said?
The 9th or the 23rd would be the Tuesdays around our meetings.
It's October.
October, yeah.
October.
Yeah.
I could do the 9th.
9th?
Yeah.
9th work for you all?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Want to try to do the 9th? Do
Yeah,
backup,
do a
20
10-9 and.
Yeah, and
Check
do a
with-
backup of the 23rd.
Where are you
Check with
gonna
Barbara too.
Yeah.
Have to email.
be? Where are you gonna be?
I think the 9th is a great date, because
Are
I'm
you
gonna
away?
be here, yeah. I
Oh.
think it's a great date.
Is the 23rd a good backup? Does 10/23
Yeah.
work as a backup for everyone?
I'll be done with
That's
it.
for me.
It should, but
Donna, does that work for you? 23rd?
I can make it work, yeah. I'm more worried about PTOs or some of these other groups that meet.
I know Byam moved to Wednesdays.
Yeah, and I have two that are both on Wednesdays, too.
Yeah.
Center's on Wednesday, Council Schools is on Wednesday.
Yep, I think that's a Tuesday, right? I think we should just check with the council. I'm not sure. They have a meeting.
Council has it on Wednesday.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. They're Wednesday, the 17th.
Yeah.
All right. I'll look at those two dates.
Okay.
I'll confer with the police department. I'll look at the calendar to try to check PTO dates. And I'll email you guys tomorrow, let you know which kind of panned out.
Okay.
And then I'll start to put some draft materials together, and I can present that at our next meeting.
Yep.
And then if you give the blessing, we'll start publicizing to the community and the PTOs and schools and get the word out.
Since we're talking about safety, I just want to thank you for adding us to the Alice training that online. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was
It's
really
excellent.
good information, and, you know, I actually brought it to, first day of school today, and I said, hey, we gotta look into this, because
Right.
it just does give you a lot more options than, you know, just locking down in the room.
Yep.
So, that was good experience.
We had, we'll cover this in the presentation, but last April, we had about 20 or so administrators from the district be trained. It was a 2-day training, not just the online training, but like in kind of facilitating drills and discussions in the schools, utilizing a lot of those different options that you saw in the video. And it probably took an hour and a half or so to kind of go through the video and be able to complete that. But that is the video and the training that all of our district staff took. So we're gonna be kind of drilling on that and reviewing it at the September 18th, I believe, PD day in the district. So we just thought it was nice for you to see what staff was seeing. That's nice for the staff, because again, they can kind of do it at their leisure if they want to. When they actually do the professional development training on that half day, they'll be able to get into some of the deeper discussion and some of the drilling, but even for, you know, churches are going to it a lot now, private schools utilizing that kind of an options-based approach. That particular product, and there are 2 or 3 kind of bigger ones out there, they're pretty cost-effective as far as the training modules go, so it doesn't kind of kill a school as far as cost is concerned. But, no, I'm glad you liked it, and we just thought it was good for you to see the same materials that the staff are receiving and viewing in the schools. Good.
All right, moving on. Next is the preliminary kindergarten enrollment report.
So you actually have a report that Linda had prepared. Would you like to kind of review this with the committee?
So, as you noticed, you have the 4 different schools with the kindergarten enrollments. Typically, we have the birth rates, and we have the information from NESDEC that we received to try and gauge how many students would technically be going into a classroom. Normally, you start to see some of these numbers creep up in 1st grade before we had full-day kindergarten, because those students weren't necessarily with us, so this gives us a better idea of how many students we have. There is a larger number of students at the Center Elementary School than the other 3 elementary schools that are going on right now. Actually, when speaking with Diana Fullreader, even today, because last year we were like, okay, well, where are these kids? Where did these numbers come from? She's had a lot of move-ins that were like unexpected move-ins, upwards of 9 students showing up and moving in. That's a significant amount of students, because last year we didn't hear that these numbers were that high. We didn't have any issues at any of the schools. So this year she's seeing them creep up a lot more, and a lot of that has to do with move-ins. We did discuss too about trying to identify if there's certain places that have students that are moving in. Like, she knew about a neighborhood that they built some homes, and there's upwards of 20 students that moved into that actual neighborhood. Also, some of the new complexes that are going on. So we're gonna have to query out how many of these students are coming from where, to see if there is this significant uptick in that specific school district, for that specific school.
To Linda's point, there's a few things that we can't fully account for. So kindergarten is the first time we're actually seeing these kids register for the school system. So again, it used to be 1st grade when we'd be caught a little bit off guard. Now it's kindergarten. If we take a look at the NESDEC enrollment projection, we're pretty much on to like what the total number of kindergarten students who are going to be enrolling for this fall is based on that projection. Same thing happened last year, though. We had a little bit higher projection or actual attendance at Harrington as opposed to the other schools. The one thing that we can't control is we don't have a centralized enrollment process. So we enroll students by fixed neighborhoods. So even though our total number of kindergarten kids is what we're expecting to come, when you do an enrollment projection like NESDEC did for us, or if we even do one on our own, we can't actually guarantee with any certainty there's going to be even disbursement of the students over the 4 schools. So that is very difficult. So our numbers are not way off from the projection, where we're actually kind of being surprised, which is a positive. At least we know NASDAQ's total enrollment is in line with what we're seeing. But what we can't predict is where these kids actually live within the community. What we do is, and again, even like at the end of August, I mean, the people were just coming through the door left and right to register, not only for kindergarten, but just, I think, going back before Labor Day, kind of got everyone a little bit, who didn't have school age children before, a little off kilter, and they had to come in and get enrolled. One of the things that we do, obviously, is take a look at a couple of different supports for these classrooms. So, we have talked internally about, as these numbers continue to creep up, particularly at our kindergarten level, we'd love to see those numbers be in the low 20s, low to mid 20s. There's no hard and fast, if you hit 25, automatically you add a classroom. But we do take a look at the students in the classrooms, their needs. Are the classrooms supported by multiple adults during the day? Are there regular paraprofessionals in the classroom? As the numbers continue to creep up, does it make sense to just add a 5th section as and unsupported sections across the board? We have those discussions with the building to figure that out. And we're still in those discussions right now. For all practical purposes, as you do creep deeper into the school year, though, we try to make these decisions, either prior to school or over the first couple of weeks of school, because once kids have an established routine in a classroom, it's very difficult to break that out and then, say, add another classroom and just disperse the students. But we have had discussions with Diana. She's been able to reallocate some paraprofessional time within the building to really support her kindergarten. Her first grade numbers are also right around 25. So those are large numbers as well. We're going to continue those discussions. I'm not opposed, and we had this discussion about adding additional paraprofessional support if we think that would be the right support for the students, particularly during the instructional time. When they're actually doing their math instruction or ELA instruction. It may not be quite as necessary during other parts of the day, so, 1 or 2 bodies might be able to really kind of reach all 4 classrooms. We haven't totally taken off the table, perhaps another teacher as opposed to paras, and better supporting those students. So all kind of things are in play at this point. Believe it or not, we are still seeing students register for classrooms, withdraw from classrooms, so there is still a little bit of movement that's taking place, but we're going to watch that over the course of this week. If it, became a point where we want to add some additional supports to that, either a teacher or paraprofessionals, I'd certainly bring you that recommendation. I don't want the viewing public or the parents to not think that we're not on top of that. The one thing that is just difficult for us is we can't control where the kids live as to where they actually go to school. And we very much, adapt and, kind of adopt practices based on our enrollments. These aren't terribly out of line with some of the enrollments we've seen in the past at the other elementary schools. Again, we try to have the lowest, or ideally the lower class sizes at the elementary levels, and then a little bit more as you work your way up through the system. But, we certainly are going to fully support these classrooms and these students, and we're going to work with the staff to figure out what the best way to do that is. And again, thinking longer term, these kids are going to be with us, at the Senate School for the next 5 years. So they're going to be leaving K and going to 1, 2, 3, 4. And we want to make sure that our class sizes can take, some influx and some movement, because you are going to have other move-ins over the course of the years. One thing we did talk about, Linda alluded to as well, is obviously there are streets that feed the schools, and we don't have a lot of control over that. But we are watching like the housing developments that come up in town. And it doesn't seem to be the case in this particular instance, but I know the development at the end of Mill Road is starting to open up, and that is technically zoned to Center School. So we know that South Row has more capacity than Center School. So what we may end up doing is we're kind of working with the housing folks to figure out exactly, when these are going to be opened up and when people are going into them. That's a situation we might be able to come to you and say, even though we have this development zone to go to Center, we're going to recommend that whole development actually be rezoned before the kids get in and enroll them at South Row. Busing-wise, it's not going to throw things off. Our buses are going that way anyway. They have the capacity at South Row, and that, something like that would be a modification to our enrollment map, but it would make a lot of sense to just have a whole development feed a school as opposed to kind of one-offing different streets and things along those lines. So there's a lot in play. I want you to, kind of know that we are working on this. We're not caught off guard by this, but there's just no quick and easy answer. When, again, we don't have a centralized enrollment system where when a student comes to us, we can look district-wide at our numbers and just move them to the next school. We enroll by neighborhood. And again, we can't balance or predict the neighborhoods, particularly at that kindergarten level. But there's a lot of work in play. To Maria's points that she spoke about earlier today, we're certainly going to work with the staff and students at the center and make sure that they're fully supported, as we would with any other school that had this situation or this enrollment.
Questions?
So, I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree. I mean, I think that, there is no hard and fast rule. And actually, I would encourage the school committee members to take a look at an article from the Seattle Times in 2014 that talked about class size, and they, in particular, referenced three initiatives, one in Tennessee in the 80s, one in California in the 90s, and one in Wisconsin in the 90s. And they talked about, classroom size and achievement. And, one of the things that they mentioned is that although you would think that there would be a direct correlation between class size and achievement, that isn't necessarily the case, because there's so many other factors that have to be looked at. One of which is, experienced teachers versus inexperienced teachers. And, so adding another body doesn't always necessarily translate into more achievement, I guess is what I'm saying. Or that sometimes we have to make sure that we're providing our staff with the proper training and the support in order to be able to manage these numbers as well. Because like I said, just the reduction in alone doesn't necessarily mean more achievement, right? But that being said, I certainly like to see kids get off to a good start.
Right.
And so I'm glad that we're, taking a look at this. And I was wondering if maybe, we could get an ongoing update in terms of what actions are being taken to kind of take a look at this. I also think, too, the one thing that's very important to me, and I'm sure it's being addressed, is the people who I think are best suited to make these decisions are the building administration and the teachers in the classrooms. And so I think we really need to get input from them and welcome that input. If it's a less experienced teacher and they need more support, then we need to be willing to provide that for them. If a teacher says, yeah, we're at 25, but it's okay, then I think we need to respect that,
Right.
No,
I think we absolutely do. I think the other thing that comes into play also, it's the quality of the people you have.
Right.
We do have a very seasoned and very experienced staff
Yep.
over there right now. I think sometimes when you just start to add also additional adult bodies to the room, sometimes that also becomes more management
Right.
for
Exactly.
the teacher. So
Exactly.
it's not always just welcome to say, add an extra paraprofessional.
Right.
Because there's work that comes along with that as well.
Absolutely.
Making sure that you're actually facilitating not only the student learning, but you're having the adults in the room
Yeah, and
coordinated as well.
that's, kind of what this article was talking about
Right.
is that, you don't always have the space, so just,
Right.
Breaking them off and putting them in not really a suitable space, or not having the properly trained staff there doesn't
Right.
always necessarily, it doesn't make it better just to reduce the size. But, like I said, I do think that this is something that we need to monitor very closely.
Mhm.
It is kindergarten. I want them to get off on the
Right.
right foot.
Right.
you know.
No, we all do.
I know.
And we certainly can do that. Like I said, we're gonna continue working with Center this week.
Mm-hmm.
I can just email you by Friday, just with like a little update as to where we are, or even just some of the realignment of staff that Diana's been able to accomplish at the school to support the rooms,
Yep.
and then the longer-term plan.
Okay.
And as we talked to them just today, we said we don't want this to kind of linger throughout the fall.
Right.
That we really want, if there's gonna be a kind of a decision made about, either additional supports or classrooms or whatnot, we wanna do that over the first couple of weeks of school. So, we'll definitely convey that to you, and then we can report out at the next school committee meeting, those numbers. If you, like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I think when we looked at our enrollments, it was funny that, well, this actually wasn't funny, but when you looked at like the different grade levels, I think Center that year had, say 26 and 27s in fourth grade, and the other schools were all fine. And you looked at Byam, their third grade was really high that year. They had the 26 and 27s in third grade. It was across the board. There were
Right.
different schools that just kind of had a particularly high grade level, but when you looked at the averaging district-wide, when we're kind of building our budgets, or when we're doing a projection for kindergarten, we do look at district-wide averages, because that's the best information that we have.
Right.
Again, because we don't know how many kindergarten kids are gonna sign up to go to, South Row over Byam. And I was surprised, to be quite honest with you, to see that Byam really actually had the lowest numbers of the four, because we're still kind of waiting for that housing development over there on.
Chelmsford Woods, where we had the luncheon that time, they're all below that. They'll hit in the next couple of years.
Right.
The other thing is, if you probably have seen it, but the Emmanuel property at the corner of Hunt Road is being cleared for that construction, which is 84 units.
Right.
So that, they're not through filling up by.
No, that is true, but I just, Byam has been kind of taking the,
Yeah.
Right.
the numbers over the last couple of years.
One other thing that you mentioned that I also think would be really helpful is, because there's a lot of time in the day that kids aren't necessarily in instruction. They could be in specialists, recess, lunch. And so I think that, I think that we have to take a look at adding, support in the times that it's most needed, like during instruction.
Right.
And so maybe one of the things we could also hear about is, like, what does a kindergarten schedule look like? Like, how much time is in instruction? Because I don't want parents to think that, that they're sitting at their desks all day long and being
Right.
neglected, because that just isn't the case. And we have the social emotional piece, we have, as I said, all those other aspects too. But it might help to relieve some anxiety for them to know that, there's only this block of time that they're actually.
It makes it a little easier for the building administrator too to schedule around just getting some extra resources and help during
Exactly.
the instruction times,
Right.
as opposed to like a whole day.
Right, right.
But no, we can touch on that for you too.
Other questions? Oh, John? The only other thing, I'm just addressing Marie's concerns. I think it did a nice job explaining what we're gonna try to do this year and going forward. In terms of just a general policy, we try to keep numbers in the elementaries to,
Yeah, our policy didn't change. It actually says at the grades K and 1 levels, a district-wide average of 22. At the grades 3, 4, and 5 levels, a district-wide average of 25. Again, it's not a perfect science. When we're kind of building budgets in general, I'm just always thinking elementary being like 22 to 24 kids. And that's typically what's like in my mind as far as sizes go.
And I think that was Maria's point, we need to look at the individual schools as well as the district-wide policy.
Right.
Because if you look at the district-wide policy, we might look okay.
Yeah.
But if you start looking at individual schools, it really doesn't.
And it's easy to do for grades, 1 through 12.
Right,
Because the
because-
kids are already here.
Right.
So we can make those adjustments. And when we're building the budget, if we saw this, say, in first or second grade, we might say we need to now budget for an extra section the following year. The year that we really have trouble is kindergarten, because they're not our students yet. So as they're enrolling right as the year is starting, that's where we just don't have a lot of kind of wiggle room. So we're kind of adjusting right as they're coming in. But I agree, district-wide isn't perfect for that scenario, but where we don't have them registered, that's the hard piece.
Right.
We just know is X number of kids based on birth rate and things like that are gonna be coming our way. We just don't know which schools they're going to.
Does it help to maybe shift enrollment earlier, registration, I should say?
Yeah, you know what, they do the 2 enrollments, they do the winter and the spring, and the vast majority of people come, but you can't deny someone from enrolling, even if you have the early registration.
Yeah.
And a lot of these center situations were kind of move-ins that happened either like late spring or over the summer. And you'd be surprised, there were some people that really just forgot school was starting, and they're coming to register their kids. I knew the day my twins were going to kindergarten well in advance, and we had them ready with their lunch boxes and everything. But no, some people really just did wait till the last minute, and I think even if we did the early registration, it's just not going to help that effect.
Just a thought.
any other questions on that? Thank you for that update.
No problem.
Okay, next thing is a contract negotiation study committee. There's a request from Barbara on, we'll go with that.
Certainly, yeah. No, Barbara had asked for an update on the last teacher's contract, which settled about a year ago. It was August of 2017. The contract actually wasn't settled contingent on reaching agreement on 2 of the outstanding matters, but what we'd agreed to is creating study committees or a side letter of agreement that basically talked about 3 issues that we weren't able to reach agreement on during the negotiations, to have study committees meet over the course of the year to see if we could reach agreement, and then if we could, if it was the administrative group, we'd bring it to the school committee for review and approval, and then possible ratification. The teachers' union would do the same. So they would have a study committee. If they felt like they reached an agreement and wanted to ratify, they would bring it to their membership. But as I indicated, I just wanted to clarify that the contract actually wasn't resolved contingent on those 3 items being resolved. It was just that those 3 items were moved to a study committee. And over the course of last year, we did have some informal conversations with the former leadership team, and we just didn't come to agreement even around the format or the setting up of the study committees, so there were no proposals that actually went forward. So at this point in time, when the new union leadership took over, I did send them a communication that outlined all the outstanding matters from the previous year. So this was outlined for them. We had a discussion about it. And we've got to figure out if we would like to now set up some study committees and talk about these issues, or if they want to just roll them into the negotiations for the next contract. So our current 3-year contract ends at the end of the school year in June of 2019. And there is a clause in the teacher's contract that indicates that either side can notify the other as of October 1st that they would like to begin bargaining for the successor agreement. So if the matter isn't resolved by October, I believe what would happen by default is basically if these items were to be raised, they would be raised through the actual negotiation process as opposed to study committee. So that's likely what will happen at this point. But I did just want to provide that as way of background and clarification to Barbara's request. I put a copy of the teacher's contract page that actually just lists those three agreements, just again to be responsive.
Any questions? Did you get any feedback from the new leadership, union leadership, in terms of if they want to look at them now, or they want to wait for?
No, like I said, we did meet with their group. Their group met with our whole admin team, talked a little bit about moving forward and how we're going to work together. And I don't know yet how they want to pursue that, but it was relayed to them as an outstanding matter. So we'll have to see what they want to do.
Great. All right, everybody good? All right, moving on, next thing is fundraising policies and procedures. This has come up a couple of times. Just in concern, I mean, we have policies on fundraising, it's just the procedures in terms of how do groups go about getting approval for these types of fundraisers? How does the money get collected? Where is it going to? How does it get dispersed? That type of stuff, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried to take just a crack at this, and I know we've had several discussions. Donna actually has talked to me about this on multiple occasions about different facets of it. So I just tried to kind of put down on paper the way that we're actually, not policy-wise, because now we have new policies, but procedurally how we're handling some of this, and made some recommendations about kind of streamlining and being more public about it going forward. So one of the things that we did talk about is at the elementary school level, there really is very little to none fundraising that takes place that's under the auspices of the individual schools themselves. The fundraising is really PTO-based. So the money doesn't channel through the school department. It really goes to the PTO. The PTO is responsible for the record keeping and bookkeeping, and they are private entities, so we really don't have oversight or control at the elementary school level. So that's kind of cut and dry on their particular level. Even if a school at the elementary level were to do a fundraiser, it typically is in collaboration with the PTO, and the PTO is the one that's responsible for the money. I haven't heard too many complaints along the elementary level, so if we're not complaining, we're not gonna
No, the PTOs do a
touch that
very
one,
nice
so that
job.
one works out well.
Yeah.
At the middle school and the high school is where a little bit more fundraising takes place. But I will tell you, even as a step up at the middle school level, talking to those two principals, it's not a lot of fundraising, because a lot of the fundraising actually is, again, the PTOs that do the fundraising type activities. What they do is a lot of, like, if they have a school dance, they might sell tickets to the dance and take in that revenue. The revenue goes to the student activity fund, but it's basically to just cover the cost of, say, like a DJ or pizza for the dance, something like that. There's not a lot of heavy fundraising that's happening there. It is all recorded through the student activity funds. So for my own sake, as I started talking to the two middle school principals and the high school principal, we kind of came up with the term fundraising, meaning solicitation of funds from outside sources. So it's not the child that comes to the dance with $5 to pay an entry fee to get in.
Right.
It's more, how are we going to tell the community about fundraisers where they may be solicited for funds, so that they know that something is legitimate and, what is the purpose? The kid going to the dance obviously knows that the $5 is going to cover their entry fee and their piece of pizza and the DJ. We're not getting a lot of questions or concerns about that. It would more be like the public asking, is this a legitimate fundraiser that the middle school, the high school kids are doing? What's the purpose of it? Where's the money going? Things along those lines. So when they shift the focus that way, the high school had a form which I actually attached that they utilize for their fundraising. The two middle schools each had their own, and what we talked about is the three schools getting together and just kind of having one form that we're gonna devise that's just consistent, that covers all the bases for the different trips. But Steve came over and he actually had a giant 3-ring binder that had all these forms in them. The club advisor or the coach would actually kind of fill out this form and specify the activity. But the information really isn't shared anything other than the principal's approval. So he knows what's going on, but the general public doesn't know what's going on fundraising-wise. At the end of the fundraiser, the second piece of the form is whoever's doing it is supposed to kind of give a detail of the fundraiser. You know, how much money do they take in? How much do they pay out? Do they make money in the fundraiser, lose money in the fundraiser? And he said the majority of the fundraisers do complete this form, and then it goes in the 3-ring binder. He said some fundraisers don't do that form, so that's more of an enforcement piece on his end, kind of moving forward. But we all talked, the three of us, about, you know, can we, number one, standardize the form, make it electronic, and we all have agreement around that. Then if it is electronic, how could we actually make the process more transparent and more public? So what we talked about doing was at the school-based level, but then it would also feed up to the district page, under the, probably the parent or the community tab, having a little header for fundraising. So that if you go to the school site or you go to the district site and you click on fundraising, if the principal has approved one of these fundraisers, again, this is the outside solicitation thing, not the school dance.
Right, right.
It would actually say, you know what, the chess team has been approved and they're gonna do a fundraiser. They're looking to raise $500 to buy new equipment, new chessboards or whatnot. Here are the dates of the fundraiser. You know, this is a school-sanctioned fundraiser, so that the public, if someone came to them and said, well, why are you buying raffle tickets for the thing? They could go online and actually see this is a legitimate event. And then we could be a little bit more stringent at the end of the event as far as having, the money is all being channeled appropriately through the Student Activity Fund, but having the final financial report completed, and then somehow, this is what Bill is working on, technology, somehow posted to that website also, under the fundraiser. So you pick up the chess fundraiser, and in the end, once it's done, you would actually have some kind of little icon that lets you see the financial report, so that you can see, you know what, you tried to raise 500, but you really only raised 4. And here's what it went for. So here's kind of your profit loss statement almost on your fundraiser. And then I think that would go a long way towards kind of streamlining the procedure piece. On the financial end with the student activity funds with Joanna, if when we do the quarterly report on finances for the general district finances, what we could produce then is the actual student activity account, kind of profit loss statements and the general ledger accounts from student activities, and provide that to you. And then, so then that would be a report that would also be posted in our packet. It would be posted online. It'd be public if someone wanted to go see and actually look through all the detail on the high school account and see how much the chess team, you know, how much they have to make the year, how much they end the year with, you know, all that detail would be there. And I think we're gonna try to get in the habit of just quarterly, when we produce the regular financial statements for you. Joanna and her staff in the business office do the monthly for all the club advisors and the coaches. I think monthly is a little overkill, but if we did quarterly, and it went right along with all your other quarterly financial reports, you'll then have one packet that will have all this information in it, and I think that would be very, I'm guessing, but user-friendly too, for the viewing audience. So if you ever wanted to go back and look at something, that would be there. So I did meet primarily with those 3 principals. It was the high school principal and the 2 middle. We quickly determined with the elementary that they're really not associated with this or heavily involved, so we let them off the hook. But the 3 gentlemen and Bill in technology and myself are gonna work over the next couple of weeks to get this streamlined before we get too deep into the fundraising season. But wanted to bring this to you as kind of our thought process and recommendation, again, before we went too deep, in case you had any other ideas that you wanted to discuss.
So just so I'm clear, would this include athletic fundraisers, like the
Yes, so
car washes or Lions cards or whatever?
It would. The
Okay.
athletic fundraisers and all the athletic accounts are actually sub-accounts under student activities.
great.
So anything in student activities
Okay.
would be there as well.
I think this is great. I think it's certainly a great start, you know, I think, you know, we need to see how it goes. You know, we might find it,
Right.
we may need to tweak some things, but I think this is a good place to start in terms of helping to make the whole process much more transparent. So the parents can see, you know, and actually the community as well, you know, how money is being raised and what it's being used for. I think that's very important.
And it is a work in progress, so if we, as
Absolutely.
we're getting this website going and whatnot, if we find out it's clunky or it's hard to upload the packet, we may have to figure out a different way on the website to do that. But our goal would be to have there be one place where people can go and see all the approved, school-sanctioned fundraisers, when they're taking place, that profit and loss statement at the end of it to show what was actually coming in and going out, and have it be tied ultimately to the financial reports that Joanna puts out.
So, Joanna, your reports are public, right? Okay, so the other thing I think we have to really start emphasizing to people is sometimes all you have to do is ask. You know, they could call, right, and say, could you help me, figure out, I don't
Sure.
know, where that $400 for the chess club went, or whatever, how is this? Because I think that sometimes, maybe they don't know where or who to ask, but, I think that the information is available, and we have to encourage people to start seeking it. If they have questions, that we can answer without,
Right.
feeling stressed or anxious or upset about something, that, we could probably resolve with a phone call.
Yeah, and I think we can take some steps forward to at least have this be a little bit more public as far as the process is concerned.
Yep.
But people still might not understand or have lingering questions about an actual report that's there. So they really do have to reach out and ask for clarification. We're welcome to, happy to kind of walk anyone through something.
Right.
But sometimes, if there is a nagging question that's bothering someone, if they don't ask us, we don't know how to respond.
And I think that's incumbent upon us to continue to encourage people to do that.
Yep.
Al, John?
One thing that occurred to me, sometimes teams get donations.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be included in this?
If a team took a donation, it wouldn't technically be posted to the website because it's not a fundraiser, but the donation would be recorded in the student activity fund.
Okay.
So the donation would be listed on Joanna's financial report at the end of the quarter, but it wouldn't actually be a fundraiser.
'Cause I think that happens more than we realize. The other thing is, down at the bottom of the form, it has workers' credit union.
Well, that was just the form that
Well, I
they were
know, but
using.
have we found anybody that's willing to be a bank at the high school?
No, not yet.
I'll tell you that, I hope we can, because the security of having that, where the kids just walk in and get rid of the money is huge.
Mhm.
Because we had, I won't say a lot, but we had thefts more often than you'd think, because what happens is advisors take stuff and they put it in their desk when you don't. And at one point, a number of people have access to the safe, and that's not as secure as the bank would be, I don't think. So I strongly encourage us to have some way of making deposits as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
John?
No questions from
Donna mentioned Lions cards. This is the time of year where you get a lot of questions about Lions cards. I know when the program first started, and I don't know if this is still true, the football team would get them first, and then the other teams would get them, and that was always a little contentious. I don't know if that's still the case, but we were talking the other day, it's just the fall teams that get this opportunity.
Right.
The winter teams don't, the spring teams don't. Is there some way we can work more collaboratively with all the athletes and, so everybody gets an equal opportunity to raise these funds? Right now, it's just fall teams, and some of the fall teams aren't even doing it because they just get frustrated with the process, I think. And then the winter teams and the spring teams is nobody's gonna wanna buy a Lions card in December.
I still need to do some work on this.
Yeah.
It's not a quick answer. I did ask Steve, with the Lions Club, right time fundraising like that, is there a reason why we couldn't have all the teams get the things at the same time? Even the winter teams and the spring teams, so that they could all just go out and sell, and whatever you sell just basically gets earmarked for that team whenever it comes up. And he said, the one thing he didn't think about, and I didn't think about this, is it's very difficult to do that for cut sports. So on like a track team or something like that, where if the kid, it's a no-cut sport, then it's okay. The kid, if they basically sign up, they're gonna be on the team. But if you're doing like basketball or baseball or tennis or something like that, where a kid could potentially be cut, then I use, what is the message? And I guess Steve had actually had some experience in Andover with something similar to this, where the child almost feels like they're paying their way onto the team, or like they're contributing. So it's very difficult to cut them at that point because they've done this fundraising.
Right.
So he said that was an issue, and so they typically had never done that for any kind of cut sports. in the past, but the Lions card fundraising, again, I don't have concerns where the fundraising money is going. I really do think it's ending up in the student activity fund and it's being paid out. But what I don't have is still some of the background knowledge about exactly why we do certain fundraisers and when, and how we could be more inclusive to doing that.
Do we have any clinics that benefit the team? Camps, clinics?
Yes, they do that as a fundraiser for the teams.
Okay.
Like, let's say the basketball team did a clinic.
I know some of them are private too, right?
There are some people that rent the high school and will actually do a private one, but they would have to pay a fee to do that. I do know, like, during vacation weeks, I've seen teams will actually, run a little mini camp, let's say it's a basketball camp. It's almost like a fundraiser for the basketball team, and that money would get recorded in the student activity fund and expended for that purpose. So
I
it
think
is,
I think
it's a
it is
work in
worth looking at.
progress.
Yeah, I think that is worth looking at.
But I think we'll take some steps in the right direction,
Absolutely,
hopefully, to make this a little
So we're
smoother.
not pitting one team against the other either,
No, we're not trying to, right?
But I do sometimes get the feeling that's what people think, that, it's the
Yeah, I
football team
think we
against
have
the,
to, yeah.
soccer team against the cross-country
And
team.
if everybody gets a chance to
Right.
sell them, then maybe they're used for something different. I don't know what the Lions card money is used for
Right.
now,
Right.
so
It's
maybe,
it's team-specific.
okay.
If it's raised by the football team, they might, buy practice equipment or uniforms or something like that. If it's the soccer team, maybe it was something else that they were buying.
Okay.
But it's not for a specific thing. It's basically to just defer and offset costs directly associated with running that program.
Okay.
Okay, do we need
You
any,
generally like some of the stuff that I
Yes,
talked about as
yes,
far as?
absolutely. I think we're definitely headed in the right direction.
Okay.
so do we need to take any action here?
How about just like a motion to accept the report as a report of progress? And, you're not binding yourself to anything, but basically, I'll continue to work with the three principals on this and Joanna.
Okay.
At the spot, Al.
Well, I was looking for the language.
I'm sorry, it's not
All right.
formal, just to accept the report as a report of progress.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, thanks for doing that. All right, next are the budget transfers, I think.
Yep, we've got a couple budget transfers in front of you this evening. Perhaps I'll just walk you through all four of them, and then we can go back and take some discussion of motions. But I did have the opportunity to attend that school safety conference in Orlando this past summer, which was, actually, it was an excellent conference. One of the speakers were very good, but what I really got a lot out of was the exhibit hall and all the different vendors that were there to talk about their newest products and things like that. One of them, as we're moving this whole emergency response to an options-based response, having timely information in everyone's hands in an emergency. A company called Safe Plans actually has digitized all of the kind of the emergency access to building plans, floor plan layouts. In the event, unfortunately, if there were ever an emergency, not only our police, but responding officers from like other jurisdictions could easily jump on to one of our terminals or a terminal in their car and actually have access to our building plans and layouts and cameras and things like that we don't currently have. I went through a training with this company. We did a couple of online tutorials. I've talked with the police chief about it. They're actually going to do another training for us. I think it's tomorrow, an online demonstration. But I actually think this would go a long way towards kind of automating a lot of our, not only procedure manuals, because it's all district and school specific, but also just our emergency plans. It can integrate with the building layouts. You can actually integrate with cameras in the building, so you could pull up one screen, let's say, of Chelmsford High School. And it would be kind of a grid, for tactical type purposes, a grid type layout, but you'd actually see where all the cameras at the high school are. So even if you didn't know the high school, if you're looking at a picture of it and you click on a particular camera in the building, you can automatically jump in and see that particular camera. So if you're responding, that's just a great resource without having to it's all web-based, so without having to download any kind of software on your device or controller. It was pretty significant. There's some, the significant cost of this program is just some one-time updates where the company actually comes out they do a whole security assessment of your buildings with you. So they walk the buildings, they work with us in the police department to check on safety, security, response protocols. They'll review all of our different plans and drills with us, and then they help us automate that into their online system, which we then maintain. They also would do site mapping, so they would take a look at all of our aerial shots of our schools, put together site maps, load them into the program. Anything that was missing, they would add. So, we did some internal plans last year with, say, adding the modular classrooms in the buildings, but technically, we don't have the same aerial shots of those modular buildings as we have of the rest of the building, so we would add that at that point in time. They would help us create all the different building layouts within the building to configure to their programs, to say where we have security cameras and things like that. So there's about a $32,000 one-time fee for them to basically come out and do all this work. But then going forward, it's nominal. It would only be a cost of about $3,500 off the top of my head going forward each year. It's like $400 or $500 per site that you're basically just paying for the renewal. So unless you were to add a new building or something like that, the fee going forward would only be, $3,500. We would just add that into our technology budget in one of our licensing type accounts. But for the first year, we would need the $36,000 for all the one-time costs. So personally, I think it's a great product. Of all the different things I saw that day, when it came to preparedness, and I think that it would be nice to have a third set of eyes on looking at our safety schools from like an assessment type standpoint, to be able to take into consideration any recommendations that they may have. If the state does have grant funds that come out around school safety, we would then actually have kind of a third party saying they've looked at our buildings and could just give us some backing to our grant applications going forward. But I think it's worthwhile. I'm happy to answer any questions you would have, but I definitely think it's worth pursuing. Would you rather talk about these one at a time, or do you want to do them all?
One at a time, I think.
Yeah,
Then
just-
we can ask questions.
Okay.
We'll forget. So, any questions on this particular item?
Yeah, so you get to review the software and see how it works. They have a real-world example? Was it a demo, like?
No, it was one of their clients.
Okay.
So no, I've actually seen like one of their clients that's set up,
Yeah.
and we kind of jumped onto their system and took a look at like their cameras and responses and all that stuff.
Wow.
I saw it when I was in Florida, but then we've actually done like a web demo, a follow-up here.
Okay.
That was more specific to like what a district our size would look like. So I did that last week.
Nice.
Yeah. No, it's actually a very cool product.
I like this a lot. The one thing that I would ask that, that you and Chief Spinney continue to explore, though, are what tools teachers can have in the classroom.
Right.
In the moment.
Right.
And, because one of the things that continues to concern me is if there's no communication, let's use Chelmsford High School as an example. It's a big building, and if you're trying to make a decision about what you're going to do in terms of your plan of action, and you don't have any communication about what is happening around you.
Right.
It's hard to make those decisions.
Right.
Right? So that's one thing. So what is the method of communication? And I know, it can be maybe less formal, and I also know that there's some software out there too that allows for an app to be loaded onto your phone where you can post,
Right.
Right. Information like that. And then, what tools in the classroom do teachers need beyond some of the ones that we saw in the video, to secure their room?
We're actually going to there were a couple of different vendors that have kind of a door locking mechanism.
Yes.
I forget the exact names, but they looked all different, but they basically lock the door from the inside. It's almost like, the little kick plate at
Yes.
the bottom of the door that locks it. They're very cool, and, they also do work if you ever had to get into like a barricading type situation. We're going to a training the third week of September, I think it's the 17th or 18th, at Stonehill with the state fire marshal, because a lot of the pushback that districts have gotten, or towns have gotten when they've tried to implement some of these things, has been less from fire departments, but more from, less from police departments, but more from the fire officials.
Right.
Just with regard to, current codes and laws and regulations about what you can actually do to lock and not lock a building. So they're laying out a whole, training program with police and school districts. I know the state fire marshal will be there. So we're gonna get some more information that day on that. That's gonna be another avenue. I think this is more like the digital,
Yes.
kind of setup.
Yep.
But then we still are gonna be working on, kind of physical improvements to
Right.
the actual classrooms and buildings themselves
Right.
to harden them in the event of an emergency.
Right. No, like I said, I like this a lot. I just want to make sure that we continue to explore those things too.
No, we are. Yeah, we are.
There was a system that had blue buckets, I don't know if you saw that, where they had hammers and wedges and different things in them. It might be interesting to just know it was in them. It's not,
Those are like those go buckets that they talked
well,
about.
they're big blue buckets with a whole bunch of rope. I don't know what else is in there, but I mean, it gave them some tools, which is along the line of what you were talking. I just don't know what was in it.
Nothing. Well, and I,
Are they picking on you, Linda?
No, they're not, they are picking on me, yes, they
Well,
are.
I wouldn't put up.
I won't put,
I don't want to get too far off track, but, I think that, as the administration is going through the building, you don't set up your room anymore for aesthetic purposes. You set up your room for, barricading purposes, really, make sure you've got that heavy piece of furniture or something by the door that you can move into place, and I think that, we want to make, we want people to take a critical look at,
Right.
Are we set up for something, and continue to explore these other options as well.
Now, have you run this by the police department and the police chief and all that? Has he looked at it yet? And
Yeah,
kinda-
we're doing that tomorrow. So I verbally talked to him about
Okay.
this, and they're actually going to attend the demo tomorrow.
Okay.
And chief and a couple of his command staff to look at them.
Are there other districts that are using this particular product, or?
I don't know locally
Yeah.
about this one. This particular company had a lot of vendors, it seemed, in the, like the southeastern part of the country, going up through Washington and Maryland seem to be big communities that were using this particular product. I don't know of anyone in the, say, the Merrimack Valley that's
It's not
using
getting
it.
any feedback? It's a-
No.
okay.
But, I mean, the feedback that I received from the other companies that were using it,
Yeah.
they're very happy with it. They're not, again, we could talk about this forever,
I know.
but one of the things that I like about this as well is electronically, you can kind of manage who has access to what plan at what time. So in this system, we'll obviously have, and I don't want to get too detailed to have all of our plans out there, but,
Right.
it have all of our district level response protocols in the system. But then each school has kind of an addendum to the plan that really talks specifically about special circumstances around their school. Each school might have various, rally points and things like this. You wouldn't have in a district-wide plan. But, so if I happen to be at South Row and I was a teacher in the building, it integrates with our Active Directory on the network, so it would identify you as a teacher, say, at South Row. So when you log into the program, you would have all South Row specific information, because that's the school that you really need to have all of your information on. It wouldn't necessarily be, you wouldn't be as concerned about McCarthy or Parker or things like that. But it allows us also, if we were to send out some kind of an update to, say, the South Row plan, we can kind of push that out to all the users that are registered at South Row, and the user gets a message, and then we also, on the back end, can go in and verify that everyone actually has received the message, has acknowledged the message, and they have now accepted the new plan. That's kind of site-specific to their school. So for us, it provides a layer of also knowing that, our intended message got out to who it needs to, that people have actually accepted and said, yes, I have actually seen this, kind of signed off on it, and I'm acknowledging this plan. And so if you get 20 people in a building, and, 18 of them are green, because we know those people have received and are now acknowledging this, and 2 people aren't, we can go and say, John, I noticed you didn't get this, did you receive this, is your email, link not working, something like that. We can isolate to the 2 people who at that school haven't acknowledged receipt of the update or the addendum or whatnot. So there's got some really nice admin functionality behind the scenes that will help us kind of push out updates and alerts and things along those lines.
All right, I get one more person. If emergency personnel was to access this information, because I believe this came up at one point, maybe during the presentation, could classrooms be designated as, like, for example, special education classrooms that could not be evacuated? Do you know what I'm saying? Because that was a concern for parents. What do you do if you've got a classroom and there is no option to evacuate because it's just not feasible?
Right.
You
You would hard code that into your building map.
That's what I was wondering. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
so, I mean, if
Yeah.
if most of your school was, white,
Right,
which is, how the layouts look.
right.
But if you had one of the specialty type rooms, you could hard code it a special color,
Okay.
and then you could even put notes around that particular room,
Okay.
5 students in the room, with particular disability,
Okay.
so that the responders know where to
like that,
go,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
first.
I like that.
No, I'd be happy to show you, and I do think, for your own sake, we can't talk about all of this stuff
Sure.
publicly, but once we get rolling into some of the response trainings, and like say, we get some of these products online, we can have an executive session for you to really kind of see behind the scenes some of the information that we're all kind of drilling with and preparing, so that you have a better comfort level when you're talking to people
Okay.
about how, seriously we take this and how prepared we are
Right.
in our preparation.
Any other questions on this? Entertain a motion?
I move that we approve the transfer of $36,100 from the special education tuition, from special education tuition line items 9330 to district-wide MIS school security line item 1450, period.
Second.
Any other questions? Okay, Al?
Aye.
Lana?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0.
And just as an aside, I very much appreciate that. I'll provide you an update on this as well. Just in case a question comes up about why we're recommending the fund for this to come from, I don't want people to think we're just taking money out of the special ed tuition account. But we, as I mentioned in a little note for the viewing audience, we actually have budgeted now more special education tuition than we have a need for in this particular year. So we're gonna have to make some adjustments out of that account, because circuit breaker carryover was closer to the $2 million. So we have the sufficient kind of revolving fund balance that we want. We're now gonna have to start kind of spending down some money. So I don't want people to, just think that I grabbed this account.
Yeah.
But we are gonna have to start doing some shifting within the budget. And this was a way to do a transaction with just touching one account, as opposed to sprinkling a transfer through the whole budget. So just, if someone was watching, I don't want them to think we're just depleting,
Sure.
depleting these funds.
It's okay. Oh, I've got some great ideas for that money. It's in our goals. So,
Okay.
yeah. So,
Second item that we're making a request on. So a couple of years back, if you recall, when we implemented the new custodial cleaning model, and we went from completely outsourcing the product to the hybrid model, where we have some staff during the day that we employ, and then the rest of the night we get contracted out. When we brought staff on board, we actually didn't have a vehicle for our facilities director to drive. The police department at the time was surplusing some old vehicles and cruisers, and they ended up giving one to us. So we've had that for about 2 years. It was a surplus car 2 years ago, and we've absolutely gotten its life out of it. It has died at this point. So we're in a situation where I know this is crazy, but we actually just need a vehicle going into the winter. We could buy a used car, we could potentially look for another surplus car, but we're at the point we end up putting more money into a used car to try to fix it than to just buy one new vehicle that can last 10-plus years in the district. So we're looking just to be able to make a transfer into the maintenance of ground account to be able to purchase a new vehicle, and then we'll actually, we'll offer the other vehicle back to the police department if they want to surplus it, or we'll have to work with the town to somehow surplus it, because it's not repairable or drivable anymore. But I got to do some legwork on that, because I don't know where it was in our car originally, what I have to do to kind of get rid of it. So I'll work that through with the town, but we're just requesting a transfer of $25,000 to go into maintenance and grounds from, again, special ed tuition to be able to make this purchase.
so what would be the advantage of having a vehicle versus them putting in for mileage?
Oh, it's to our advantage to do, to actually own the vehicle.
Is it?
If they were putting in mileage to travel around, we'd far exceed the cost of the car. Because if we buy a new car, for what we're gonna drive on it, we're gonna get a new vehicle, it's gonna go, 10 to 15 years. Just the amount of mileage, the IRS reimbursement rate, we'd be paying a lot more in that, and we really wouldn't have any product to show for it in the end.
Okay.
So by making the purchase, you're better off.
And then, other than, for, transportation, is this vehicle used for anything else? Like plowing or anything like that?
It wouldn't be a plow truck. This would be like a small vehicle just to drive around, say,
Okay.
school to school around the town. We don't plow now, so I wouldn't necessarily want to get into plowing. And if you were going to plow, we'd have to buy like a 4x4. It would have to be a
Okay.
bigger truck.
Right.
It'd be plowing costs, and that actually gets quite expensive.
Twice the money, at least.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
well,
wasn't
it's that,
sure if
then
this
it-
was used for anything else.
No,
other
it
than
really
that.
puts it just basically carrying, if we
Okay.
ever had to move something from one school to another.
Okay.
But no, this would be like a smaller vehicle.
Okay,
So, I move that we approve a transfer of $25,000 from special education tuition, line items 9330, to maintenance of grounds, line item 4210.
Second.
Any other questions? My other, only question is, they have them making a model in mind?
No, this would be like a, like the food services currently uses like a little Ford Escape, something four-wheel drive, because this is the vehicle that like Brian will drive in the snowstorms to man to the schools. But some kind of like a small SUV that is like a four by four, just for snow.
Okay, Al?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0.
Thank you. Third budget transfer this evening, as you recall, at the last meeting, I actually had provided an update. We just didn't have the results yet. But there had been some concerns and complaints at Parker Middle School about acoustics in some of the classrooms. So we did have a company come in and actually measure the rooms. And they came back that the rooms did have kind of a reverberation rate that was above what the standard would be. So they had recommended installing so many square feet of these Armstrong Optima planks, which basically just sound absorption planks in the rooms. Our custodians did that in the room that tested the worst with regard to the test results, and the company came back out and tested them again, and it brought it down to range. So that was good. In talking to Brian, our facilities director, the cost to actually come out and test the rest of the rooms in the 7th and 8th grade that are having this complaint, per room would almost cost as much as the material to just outfit and do the project. So we actually said, instead of spending the money and having the company come out and tell us how much to install, and then having a second wave of having to come out and install it, let's just actually install, because it's gonna cost you the same amount of money. Basically, it's a pallet worth per classroom of this material. Our own custodians can install it. And if we purchase the material, then over the course of the fall, we're getting into like, say, basketball season. So we have a custodian in during the weekend anyway for overtime for like a basketball group. We'll ask them while they're watching the building to actually just install kind of a room at a time. And we're hoping over the course of the weekend to knock off a couple of rooms. And this will be a project that will go between now and probably Christmas or so. But if we can knock off the other 15 core 7th and 8th grade academic classrooms, that will bring the sound absorption rate up to what the acceptable standard is, and not have to go back and kind of have that engineer come out again. Again, you know, in a perfect world, you'd probably have it be measured. Some classes are gonna need more, some are gonna need less, but you're gonna pay the same amount of money as you would to just buy the product and do it once. And we know that we actually install the product in the worst, in the classroom that had the worst rates. So all the other classrooms, by installing that same amount, are only gonna be above the threshold, and I'd rather be above for the same amount of money than pay twice. So that's why this recommendation is there. And so we're recommending approximate cost of the materials to be about $20,000. And again, just moving that money to the supplies custodial account to be able to make that purchase.
Any questions?
What do these planks look like? What are they?
It's basically, it's high absorption ceiling tiles. So they basically buy, it sounds like a fancy word for a really absorbing ceiling tile. They end up buying the tile, they just rip it on a saw, and in the soffits in the classrooms, it's all like a cement ceiling
Yeah.
that has like waves. So they adhere the absorption tile in the, right to the, in the, like the nook almost.
Yeah.
Of the ceiling. And then it just absorbs sound, so it's just not bouncing all over the place. So each of these classrooms is gonna need about a pallet of these special panels. They're more expensive than a regular ceiling tile.
I'm sure.
They're made for like music type studios or things like that, and they just absorb the sound. It really is remarkable, hearing the difference between the room when it's installed and not.
You know, and this is a response to concerns that teachers had there, so
Yep.
it was, you know, I
Right.
think this is a.
We were working on this. I think it took a little bit longer than some would have liked.
Right.
But there was a process to go through and kind of have that third party come in originally to just set the standard. And now, you know, we're able to go in and kind of close out the job.
Do we have any concerns in any of the schools?
Parker was the only school that we'd heard concerns from.
Okay.
I think part of this also, like, some of our elementary schools have the exact same ceilings.
Mhm.
A lot of this has to do with, too, what are the stuff you have in the classroom? Our elementary rooms have just a ton of stuff, so, you know, a lot of stuff on the walls, They have like little carpets, like the reading carpets for kids. All that is absorbing sound. In the middle schools, the classrooms, particularly at Parker, the ones we went to, you don't have a lot of extra stuff hanging on the walls. You don't have any of the reading room kind of rugs. So there's nothing absorbing sound in the rooms. So these panels are really doing that.
Okay.
But I haven't received a complaint from the other schools.
Okay. Should it be something that we take a look at? I mean, should we ask, before we go out and spend this, if this is, do you want to do like phase one and see if there's any other feedback, or I don't know if you buy a pellet in half if it's cheaper?
Parker's kind of
Yeah, but
unique
this is-
architecturally too,
The building?
Yeah, compared to all the other buildings.
It is. I think, again, like some of the elementary schools have a similar setup, but like Parker does have these, it's just the way the cement's almost poured in the ceiling. It creates these like gaps. I don't know how to say it like from an engineering standpoint, but you do need to get something in there to be able to absorb some of the sound. I don't think I would go out and just install this everywhere if we're not hearing the complaints.
Right.
But if someone else brought a complaint forward, we certainly could look at it.
Okay.
But I think this would basically take care of because there are 16 core teachers in the 7th and 8th grade, so this would take care of those core classrooms. And if we received like a one-off complaint from someone else, we could certainly address it
Okay, great.
at that time.
Anything else on this?
I move that you approve a transfer of $20,000 from special education tuition line 9330 to supplies custodial line 4230.
Second.
Any further questions? Al?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
John?
All right.
Aye. One more.
Just one sec. Oh. Joanna's telling me that the DESI function code for, I put this in for custodial, is actually 4110, not 4230.
We have to
So we
revote.
have to
Do you mind modifying or amending your vote?
Al, we gotta amend that.
Want me
Instead
to
of
say it all over
4230,
again?
it's just 4110 instead of 4230.
Okay, I recommend
friendly
that we
amendment.
change 4230 to 4110.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's all on the same page of the
Okay, you-
budget book, all right?
Put it right under the radar there.
That's good. Subtle.
Stealth, okay. Moving on to the fourth one. This is the final transfer we're recommending. We had that DESI coordinated program review last year, and one of the recommendations, or one of the pieces of guidance that we received from them, was that we have to have our parent and student handbooks translated into the second most identified home language of students. So for us, that would be Spanish. So we didn't have a budget line for this work to be done. So we're recommending the cost for the ones that you've just approved over the last couple of weeks, the student staff handbooks. I'm sorry, not the staff, the student and parent handbooks for the K-8, and then there was the high school addendum, would be approximately $7,000. So we're recommending this transfer to, from special ed contracted services, they had sufficient funds, to the English language learner contracted services.
Questions? So it's just Spanish it gets translated into?
We only have to do
That's
one
our
language.
major
Right, so
language.
that's our major language.
I move we approve a transfer of $7,000 from special education contracted services line 2440 to English language learner contracted services line 2110.
Second.
Any other questions? Al?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, before we move on that 9330, can we have maybe talk about looking at that and looking what, because that's a big difference, and to move all that money around, I'd like to see the before and after, I guess, is what I'm asking.
On what?
No, not the 9330, that line,
Special ed tuition.
special ed tuition. Can we have a discussion about that in a future meeting?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're gonna have to.
Yeah, because that was a lot of money to move.
Right.
Right, so I'd just like to see the before and
A
after.
lot of that is because we were targeting, because again, this also, there's the special ed tuition account.
Yeah.
But then there's the circuit breaker revolving
Yep.
fund, and we received the extra money from Valley.
Yep.
And then our circuit breaker reimbursement was higher than we anticipated, so we ended up, we have excess money but it was more money than we had budgeted
Right.
in our circuit breaker revolving fund. So we need to develop a strategy, which we will probably at the end of the first quarter, when we do our first quarter financials, for how to utilize some of those funds.
Okay,
So
great.
we'll be back on this again.
Like, what is the limit on that?
In circuit breaker?
Yeah.
You can't carry over more than a year's allocation. So if we receive 2.9 million this year, then technically at the end of next year, you can't have more than 2.9 in the account. I had been saying for a couple of years, I really felt like if we had 1.5 million, that was a good cushion, that was a sufficient cushion, and I still feel that way. We now have the 2, and we also have the, kind of the timing issue that we have to work on, because the last payment, the fourth quarter payment, didn't come until the first quarter of 19, right? So we have to watch to make sure, because that was like $1 million itself, that last payment. So we just need to make sure at the end of June of 19 that we don't have, say, more than the 2.9. I don't think we've even received yet our full, did we receive our allocation for the year yet? So we need to kind of watch that. But we'll report it the first quarter, and that is something that we're going to talk about over the course of the year. It's a good news story,
Yep,
but it's
nope.
just, we've just got to manage that fund wisely.
All right, next is review and approval of school committee policy. Something going on, Mike? At the window?
I don't know, she looked behind, and then I got nervous.
Sounded like it was
Something's
raining.
dripping, but it's not raining.
Oh, really?
Just
So tonight, we're gonna be approving, looking over and approving section J, which is on students. You had a couple things you wanna mention?
Yeah, this is a big section. So a couple of things. On the first page of the index, the policy that's in red, JFCA/JJCB, I removed that from the packet, so we won't actually approve that one this evening.
Okay.
That's the one we're still under legal review for. That's the policy that pertains to students that like go overseas. And Andy is looking at that to see if the policy kind of conforms to the regs, or there was the other policy that just talked about if people are out for, say, 10 consecutive days, should they actually just withdraw and then come back to us when they return? So long story short, we don't have a definitive on that policy yet. So I took that from the packet, and I just highlighted it in the index to be red, so that we don't forget to go back to that at some later date. Well, online it's red. You're printed in black and white.
Fine.
So you won't be asked to update that tonight. And the only other one is, I'm working with Mike Gilbert on, so we'll probably just do a final kind of blessing when we do the whole packet in October. Section JJF, student activities accounts with a C was Chelmsford's policy. JJF, student activity accounts, MASC, was MASC's policy. I read them both, and they're at the point where they should be, for where we need them to be. And I emailed Mike today because I thought one should be like JJF and then the other one JJFA, like a subsection. But he actually indicated that he thought we were supposed to just accept one or the other. So I'm going back and forth with discussions with him. We basically need to accept both policies because they both cover different things.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna work with him to figure out if we should just kind of meld them and put them all into one policy, or if we wanna have like a main policy and then a dash something for the second policy. But ours basically just covers how much money can be in the agency account for the funds, and his actually talks more about, what you do with funds that are delinquent, or what you do with funds with class gifts that are, when a class leaves, how long you have to keep the fund, things like that. So we actually really need both. So we can just review them and kind of do the tentative approval today. And in the final binder, we'll just figure out how we're gonna word it. But those are the only other two things I have.
All right, so we'll do the same process. We'll just go through, read the policy, who it's from, and if there's no questions, move on from that point. So first one is JB, Equal Educational Opportunities, from MASC. Second, JC, Attendance Areas, is MASC. JCA, Assignment of Students to Schools, MASC. JEB, Entrance Age Mandatory Admissions, Chelmsford. JF, School Admissions, MASC. JFAA/JFABD, Student Residency, Chelmsford. JFABC, Admissions of Transfer Students, MASC. JFABD, Homeless Students Enrollment Rights and Services, MASC. JFABE, Educational Opportunities for Military Children, MASC. JFABF, Equal Educational Opportunities for Children in Foster Care, MASC. JFBB, School Choice, MASC. JH, Student Absences and Excuses, MASC. JHCBA, Religious Holidays, Chelmsford. JHD, Exclusion and Exemptions from School Attendance, MASC. JI, Student Rights and Responsibilities, MASC. JIB, Student Involvement in Decision-Making, MASC. JIC, Student Discipline. I think this is MASC. JICA, Student Dress Code, MASC. JICC, Student Conduct on School Buses, MASC. JICE, Student Publications, MASC. JICF, Gang Activity Secret Societies, MASC. JICFA, Prohibition of Hazing, MASC. JICFA-E, Hazing, MASC. JICFB, Bullying Prevention. Is, I think MASC, both, combination of both, MASC and Chelmsford. JICH, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Drug Use by Students Prohibited, MASC. JIE, Pregnant Students, MASC. JIH, Searches and Interrogations, MASC. JII, Student Complaints and Grievances, MASC. JJ, Co-Curricular and Extracurricular Activities, Chelmsford. JJA, Student Organizations, MASC. JJE, Student Fundraising Activities, MASC. JJF, Student Activity Accounts, Chelmsford. And then the second one is JJF, Student Activity Accounts, MASC. So that's the double one.
Yeah, we need them both.
Okay.
Right.
So that's where the two of them are. JJH, Student Late Night or Overnight Travel, MASC. JJH-R, Student Travel Regulations, MASC. JJIB, Interscholastic Athletics, MASC. JJIF, Athletic Concussion Policy, MASC. JJIF-R, Athletic Concussion Regulations, MASC, I believe. That's the one. MASC. JK, Student Conduct, MASC. JKA, Corporal Punishment, Chelmsford. JKAA, Physical Restraint of Students, MASC. JL, Student Welfare, MASC. JLC, Student Health Services and Requirements, MASC. JLCA, Physical Examination of Students, MASC. JLCB, Inoculation of Students, MASC. JLCC, Communicable Diseases, MASC. JLCD, Administering Medicines to Students, MASC. JLD Guidance Program, MASC. JQ Student Fees, Fines, and Charges, MASC. JRA Student Records, MASC. And JRD Student Photographs, MASC. So, you want to do a provisional approval, is like we're doing?
Should I point out or take out the request for leave one? Say we approve it without, or something
Well,
like
we
that?
didn't, Dennis didn't cover that one, so
Okay,
skipped right over it.
all right. And the other one with the two pieces?
The other, we want to approve the content of both, I just don't know what the title is going to end up being. So the content isn't going to change, it just might be the title, but we're going to come back and give you the entire packet to approve later, and I'll point out what we end up titling it then. But the
Okay.
content's not going to change.
I move we give tentative approval of school committee policies, section J as presented.
Second.
Any questions or discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0. So
That
we
was a
get,
big one.
yeah, so we just got two small ones left, right? So-
The two small ones will be at the next meeting in September. And then, if all goes well with this, we'll queue up the entire kind of vote to accept the whole new policy packet at probably the first meeting in October.
So we're getting there.
Yeah,
Do
no,
do you
we're
have
getting
that
there.
date?
The October one?
No, it's September.
Is it the 18th?
2 weeks from tonight.
It is the 18th.
Yep, the 18th,
At what time? I don't have it.
6th.
6.
All right, any liaison reports?
I went to the Friends of Music last week, and their last two bottle and can drives, well, there would be one on September 8th, so it's the last three, actually, I apologize. One on October 13th, and one on November 10th, and then they pause for the winter and begin again in the spring.
Anything else?
So I'll be doing, I don't have an update yet, but BSA starting soon, as well as Parker. So I'm gonna be going to those PTOs and the BSA, so
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah, I was just gonna point out, yeah, all these are gonna be starting, so if you haven't gotten in contact with your schools and organizations, just get their dates and all that. Sure, it's in the next couple weeks.
One piece of good, actually, I do want to bring up the work Rachel did on the Byam, the new playground, and it's unbelievable. I don't know if you guys have gotten to go out to see it yet, but definitely check it out. It's a beautiful playground. She did a really good job with the money she had, and just really stretched the dollar to get as much equipment, the right equipment. So there's some future things they want to do. They want to add shading, and because it does get a lot of sun, but they're going to add some path work over the next few years. There's some things that still have to be done, but great place. My daughter came back, she loved it. So I'm going to bring my son over soon to see it.
Anything else? Any other liaison reports? Okay, any new items or requests anybody might have?
I do. So, can we get an update on the center school classroom size for the kindergarten?
Yeah, yeah.
A transportation update?
That'd be good.
Yes. Did you get an email from me over the weekend? Joanna had put together a little paragraph update.
I do
No.
not think so.
Do you mind if she just verbally gives it?
Sure.
Okay. And we can follow up with another written one as well.
So I had provided an update August 21st at that last meeting, and then this update is since August 31st. So between May and August 31st, we have 3,138 students who registered for the bus. This is an increase of 426 students from the update provided August 21st. So a little peak there. Again, we've sent out several Connect Ed messages to families since May, reminding them to register for the bus, and still using MCC online to register, and if they have to pay. And then as a reminder, the big thing is you still have to register even if there's no fee. And the no fee people are K to 6 over 2 miles, and then people who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. We got a lot of phone calls the first day of school, the first few days, hundreds of phone calls. And the two most common themes are, how do I register for the bus? And may I have the bus stop in front of my house? So, the business office divided up all the messages, the hundreds of messages, and called everyone back. We tried to reach them live or left a message for them to call back to guide them through how to register on MCC. And then also regarding the bus stops, so the bus companies have had the stops August 16th. So to change that daily is really not feasible. So what we're doing is we're gathering the hundreds of requests for bus stops in front of my house and see which ones make sense to accommodate. And then, so we're doing that over these next couple weeks. And then and some of them will have to go take a drive-by and see, too. And then update the bus stops and let the parents know. Then the children will get a new bus pass with the new stop and probably a new time. Any questions?
No, and that went out to parents?
What's that?
Joanna just read, did that go out to parents?
The update?
Yes.
No, I tried to email you, just the school committee over the weekend with an update, but then based on the question, and I didn't know that the response actually went through.
No, I
over
don't
the
think we
weekend.
get that one.
No,
Because Joanna had, on Friday, had to give me a little update.
just,
Uh,
yeah.
So
I've been keeping an eye out too, because just like every year, buses,
yeah, I mean,
beginning of the year are tough.
unfortunately, buses at the beginning of the year, it's never gonna go away. But, I think this year, there was a lot of effort that went into notification and reminding to parents where even if you don't have to pay for the bus, to please go online and register for the bus, because we weren't going to just assume everyone was gonna ride the bus if they were outside that mileage requirement. Because what that ended up doing was having, very, very inefficient runs, going longer than need be and hitting stops that didn't need be, because that was just kind of easier in the past. So even if you don't have to pay for the bus, you had to go online this year, register. And again, there were multiple communications that went out. We have to commit at a certain date to buses to start the school year. So that was the August 16th date. All the data that was in the system by the 15th was used to generate the passes. And again, there were like 2,700-ish, which is a lot of riders. We've got 5,000 students in the district, 2,700, on buses, more than half. We used that to commit the routes. In that last week and a half going up to school, even the first couple days of school, 400 and some odd families registered. Those were a lot of the families we were hearing from because we had already committed to routes at that point in time, and we couldn't reroute the whole district for those 400 or so people. Again, Joanne in the business office did work hard, but, we're not, we weren't kind of set up as like a call center to be able to handle multiple calls. There's only one transportation coordinator, and other people in the office chipped in to try to get back to people as quickly as they could, and at least say, this is something we can look at over time. If it makes sense, we'll try to do that. We obviously want bus stops to be as close to people's homes as can be, but by having people register, we also can kind of geographically figure out if there's a cluster of kids here, it really isn't efficient for the bus to stop at 4 different homes along the way. We're trying to feed buses up so that the routes can be efficient to like main roads, right? So even if you live on a side street, you may have to walk out to the main road to be able to get the bus and get on with 4 or 5 kids instead of having the bus stop 4 or 5 times along a private kind of side road to get to the bus stop. I know, and as a parent, it'd be frustrating, and I'd prefer to have the bus stop at my house too. It's just not economical or even, the bus routes just are not efficient if that happens. So where it can happen, and if the bus is already moving by, we try to accommodate as much as possible. But we do try to cluster and have, 2 or 3 or 4 kids get on a bus stop instead of doing these one-off pickups. And again, I do think that, Peter and the transportation group will be as accommodating as possible to some of these requests. It does actually necessitate, I've gone out to several myself to look at them to see if this even makes sense. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But, it's a process to go through because I don't know every street in town, but I want to see the circumstance and what we're asking people to do. And as a parent, would I want my child to do X, Y, and Z? So it just takes a little bit of time. And if there can be adjustments, we'll do that. Like I said, there'll be another set of passes that probably go out, and routes will be adjusted in the coming weeks. The calls have significantly slowed down at this point in time, and I think people are just kind of waiting to see if they're going to get their stop approved or not. But even the first couple of days of school, I mean, you'd have 80 to 100 people registering for the bus after the year had started. And you can't just up and redo the runs on the fly, because you've impacted the 2,700 people who did register by that date in August. So it's not a perfect science. You know, we are gonna hear complaints every year, but, you know, it will get better and better as we get better grasp of the data, and we actually have taken control of the runs, and, you know, we have more experience doing it.
Okay, and to answer your question, has this gone out to parents? This, that process part has been in the transportation
Right,
flyer.
right.
That has gone out, I think, there was, I wanna say 6 Connect Ed messages, so.
So the only reason I was asking for a transportation update is because, you know, you're right, there's always gonna be bumps, but I'm thinking if we can take the time now to kind of go back and evaluate, you know, how things went and, you know, where we can make some adjustments, you know, for next year. But I think, you know, obviously, even just having this information, you know, 426 additions is a significant number of additions.
Right.
And that, you know, that we can't just change everything. It's almost impossible to do that. But maybe there are some things that we can do in terms of getting information out so the parents do understand that if you don't register by this date,
Right.
you know, then the chances of you getting, you know, we're gonna provide you with transportation, but the bus stop may not be,
Right.
or you're not gonna get your bus pass
Clearly
right away.
outline what you need to do, because I know someone with
Right.
some data entry problems.
Right,
where
right.
Right.
People just didn't complete the process, and
They were, yeah, and Joanne can speak to
People
it. There
didn't
were a
hit the
lot of
checkout button, I
calls
guess.
with
Yeah.
people who are free, who didn't have to pay for the bus, but had to register. When you went into MCC, they would, and I'd helped a few people on the phone, they said, I registered, and I said, well, you're not, because you're not in the system, what are you doing? And they were getting to the point where they were moving their child into the checkout type box
Right.
in the system, but they didn't complete the transaction. So they didn't actually say, or use the pull down to say, I'm free because I'm more than 2 miles from home, and they never actually hit complete, so they never got the successful transaction
Right.
flag, and so they never moved into our transportation system.
Right.
And a few of them you just had to kind of walk through, because again, it's not intuitive, and if you're doing something once a year or twice a year, it can take a little bit of time, but in their minds, they thought because they moved the child into the checkout box that they were completed. But you actually have to complete the transaction for the information to get sent to us. So, you know, we'll look at the software that we use too, and if there's ways to do kind of cheat sheets or, you know, pointer-type sheets to help people get through it. But I think now that people have done it once, hopefully it'll be a little bit more intuitive next year.
So also talking about student activity fees, not the procedures, but just the fees.
Mhm.
And also to add on to that, classroom supplies. So because this is another thing that we ask parents to contribute, you know, to bring in, send in tissues and hand sanitizer and wipes.
Yep.
You know, it's great if they want to donate, but I don't want to make it be an obligation or a child to be penalized if they can't do that. A food service update,
Okay.
just the safety updates, an employee handbook update.
Yeah, we may have to limit you to 2 updates a meeting. No, if you go back to, so I got the one about the student activity fees, and that's kind of queued up for a meeting.
Yeah.
What'd you want on the classroom supplies?
Just to talk about, you know, is this something that the district can provide, or do we need to continue to rely on parents sending in tissues, wipes, and hand sanitizer? And if we do, you know, do that, if we are asking for parents to do that, can we make sure that, you know, there isn't some reward tied to that, so the kids who maybe can't, you know, bring it in aren't, you know, singled out?
Okay.
Or, you know, feel like, you know, they're losing out on something because of maybe circumstances at home.
Okay.
All right, sorry.
No, and then what was it after
Food
that?
service update?
Okay.
Continue with the safety updates. I think that would be important, especially going up to the public forum.
Yep.
Employee handbook update?
now what do you want in the employee handbook?
I just want to see how it was received, okay? I mean, this is the first time the information's all been in one place, how it was rolled out, those kinds of things. And then, the last thing is I do think, as you're doing your goals, I think that, there are, MASC guidelines for evaluation, there's DESI guidelines for evaluation, and we also have contractual obligations, for your evaluation. And I think that, rather than waiting until, June or July to talk about how we're going to evaluate, I think we should be deciding it at the beginning, based on all of those things. And to review that, and in terms of the collection of evidence, and, what that evidence should be, and, who's gonna keep it, or are we gonna do it individually? Is it a committee for collecting the evidence? Because you can do that. You cannot do the evaluation, but you can have someone to discuss,
Right.
those things. I think we should include that as well. It doesn't all have to be in the next meeting, because we'll be here till 1 o'clock in the
We'll add
morning.
it to the
Or even this
yellow
year.
list.
So,
Okay, anybody else have anything? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.